The moment I stepped into the repair shop, I knew something was wrong. The place was usually filled with the soft clatter of tools and the low hum of machines, but that afternoon, everything was silent. Too silent. Leo, the young technician who had repaired my own phone many times, stood behind the counter with his shoulders stiff, his face drained of color. His hands trembled so violently he almost dropped the device he was holding. "Mrs. Caldwell," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. "Please come closer." I felt a pinch of confusion. His eyes kept darting toward the front door as though someone might burst in at any moment. I stepped forward anyway, gripping the counter for balance. The air smelled faintly of metal, alcohol wipes, and something else, fear. Leo slowly turned the phone toward me. My daughter-in-law's phone. The one I'd brought in just an hour earlier for a simple screen repair. Only, what was on the screen now had nothing to do with a cracked display. It was something else. Something wrong. Something he clearly wished he hadn't seen. "Ma'am," his voice cracked as he swallowed hard. You're in serious danger. You need to listen carefully." My heart plummeted to the floor. A coldness washed over me, crawling up my spine like icy fingers. Danger? From what? From who? I opened my mouth but no sound came out. My breath snagged in my throat like a thread caught on a nail. He leaned in even closer, lowering his voice until it was barely audible. "I shouldn't even be showing you this out here. Someone might be watching." His eyes flicked to the windows again. "But you need to understand, what I found on this phone, it isn't an accident. And it isn't harmless." A dizzy wave of panic swirled in my chest, and for a moment, I thought my legs might give out. Before I tell you what he showed me, please subscribe to the channel if you love hearing real stories shared by people like me. Now let me tell you what happened next. Leo locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and whispered, "Ma'am, we need to talk somewhere private. My name is Margaret Caldwell, and I am 72 years old. I have lived long enough to understand that life has a way of shifting beneath your feet, quietly without warning. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I was about to face. Until a few weeks ago, my world was simple, predictable, comfortable. I lived in a modest blue craftsman home at the end of Willow Street, the one with the overgrown hydrangeas and the creaky porch swing my late husband built for me 40 years ago. It is a peaceful place, the kind of home where you can hear birds at dawn and the sound of children playing after school. I spend my mornings tending to my garden, my afternoons knitting or reading, and my evenings watching old detective dramas with a cup of chamomile tea. A quiet life, but a good one. My son Daniel is the pride of my heart. He was always a bright boy, gentle, considerate, full of promise. He became the kind of man any mother would be proud of. Steady job, responsible, thoughtful. After his father passed 5 years ago, Daniel became my anchor, checking on me, helping with errands, fixing things around the house. Then he married Claire. At first, I thought she was a blessing. Poised, intelligent, successful. A financial consultant with a razor-sharp mind and a smile that always seemed a little too polite. She wasn't warm, not the way I had imagined a daughter-in-law might be, but I told myself she was young, ambitious, busy. Not everyone shows affection the same way. Still, there were moments. Tiny pricks of discomfort I brushed away. The way she watched me sometimes, analyzing instead of observing. The way she insisted on handling things for Daniel. Our family insurance, our holiday plans, even the smallest decisions. The way she'd ask, "Are you sure you remember?" with a smile that never reached her eyes. I chalked it up to personality differences. After all, aging makes you second-guess yourself more often than you'd like to admit. But I never imagined there was anything darker beneath her polished surface. When she showed up at my door that morning, hair disheveled, coat damp from the drizzle, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, I thought she was simply having a rough day. "Margaret, I'm so sorry to drop in like this," she said breathlessly. My phone slipped and shattered. "I have a major presentation tomorrow. Could you please take it to your technician? I don't trust the big stores." It felt good to be needed. It felt normal, safe. But that small favor, that harmless little errand, was about to unravel everything I believed about my life, my family, and the people I loved. Claire stood in my doorway that morning looking nothing like the polished woman she usually presented to the world. Her blouse was wrinkled, her eyeliner smudged from the rain, and her fingers trembled as she held out her shattered phone. The screen looked like a spiderweb of broken glass, each crack catching the light as she shifted her weight anxiously from foot to foot. "I'm so sorry to barge in, Margaret," she said. "It slipped out of my hand in the parking lot. I have to present tomorrow, and every file I need is on this phone. I don't know where else to take it." Her voice was tight, almost frantic, and for once she seemed human, vulnerable. It pulled at my heart. "Of course I'll take it," I said, reaching for the phone. "I know a good technician. He's honest. He'll have it ready in a few hours." Relief washed over her face so quickly it almost startled me. "Thank you. Really, thank you." She exhaled sharply. "The passcode is 0724, our anniversary. Just in case he needs to check anything." She glanced at her watch, mumbled something about a deadline, and hurried back to her car. I watched her drive away, the taillights disappearing into the thin Portland mist. I didn't think much of her visit at the time. Phones break. People get stressed. Life happens. And honestly, I was glad to feel useful. After my husband passed, so many days felt hollow, quiet in a way that made the walls of the house seem too close. Helping Claire, simple as it was, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I was missing. I grabbed my purse, slipped on my coat, and headed for Express Repairs, the shop tucked between the bakery and the old bookstore. The warmth from the bakery ovens fogged the windows as I walked past, carrying the faint scent of cinnamon and honey. Everything felt wonderfully normal. Ordinary. Leo greeted me with his usual friendly smile when I dropped off the phone. "No problem, Mrs. Caldwell," he said. "Come back in a couple hours. I'll have this looking brand new." So I left, expecting an uneventful afternoon. I stopped at the grocery store for fresh apples and coffee beans. I returned a library book. I even spent a few minutes chatting with Mrs. Patel about her roses, which had somehow managed to bloom early this year. It was one of those days where nothing feels out of place, where life is so steady and predictable that danger seems impossible. I had no idea that, while I was buying apples and talking about flower beds, something far darker was already unfolding in that little repair shop. Something Leo would soon be too frightened to tell me in public. And by the time I returned to pick up Claire's phone, my peaceful, ordinary world was already cracking, just like that shattered screen. When I pushed open the glass door of Express Repairs a few hours later, I expected to find Leo humming along to the radio, surrounded by scattered screws and glowing screens. Instead, he stood unnaturally still behind the counter, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on me with an unsettling intensity. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're back," he said quietly. Something in his voice made the hairs on my arms rise. His usual warm, boyish energy was gone. In its place was a tension so sharp it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. "Is everything all right?" I asked, forcing a small smile. He didn't smile back. Instead, he reached behind him, grabbed the shop's front door, and locked it with a soft but decisive click. Then he flipped the sign to closed, 2 hours earlier than normal. My stomach sank. "Leo, what's going on?" He swallowed hard and gestured for me to come closer. His hands shook so badly the phone he held rattled against the countertop. It was Claire's, repaired, pristine, almost mocking in its perfection. "I didn't mean to snoop," he whispered, voice barely steady. "I swear I wasn't trying to invade anyone's privacy." But when the system rebooted after I replaced the screen, a notification popped up. One I couldn't ignore. A faint buzzing filled my ears. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "What kind of notification?" He hesitated as if choosing the wrong word might break something fragile. It wasn't just one. There were messages, files, backups, things hidden deep in the phone's storage. He lowered his voice even further. Things no one would leave on a device unless they never expected someone like me to see them. He tapped the screen with a trembling finger, navigating through a series of folders so quickly I couldn't follow. Then he paused on one, a folder labeled Private Docs. And beneath it, another marked with Claire's initials. My pulse pounded. I restored everything exactly as it was, he said. But when I saw the first message, I thought I was misunderstanding it. So I checked a few more, just to be sure. And then I realized. He looked up at me, fear flickering in his eyes. Mrs. Caldwell, this isn't normal. This isn't harmless. You need to see something. He opened a message thread, or what looked like one. Some of the previews alone were enough to make my knees wobble. There were photos, screenshots, notes, and in almost every one was my name. I felt the blood drain from my face. I don't understand, I whispered. Why would Claire? Leo shook his head. I don't know. But this isn't just her being careless. There are discussions, plans, and your son's name appears in them too. The room tilted slightly. I reached out, steadying myself against the counter. Leo, please. Tell me exactly what you saw. He exhaled shakily. I can't show you here. Not where someone could look through the window or walk in unexpectedly. I don't know who has access to her cloud sync or GPS. I don't know if someone is watching to see if this phone gets tampered with. His voice tightened. But I know this. What's on this device puts you at risk. Serious risk. My breath hitched. Fear, cold and sharp, pressed against my ribs. Leo, my voice came out thin. Are you sure? Absolutely, he said. Ma'am, I need you to trust me. Whatever is on this phone, it involves you. And it's not something you can ignore. He looked toward the shop's small back room. Please, he whispered urgently. We need to talk somewhere private. There are things I have to show you, and you need to prepare yourself. A tremor ran through me as he motioned for me to follow him behind the counter. In that moment, I knew, without seeing a single full message, that my life was about to split in two. The world I knew before this moment, and whatever terrifying truth waited for me on that screen. I don't remember leaving the repair shop. One moment, Leo was guiding me toward the back room, his voice trembling as he explained the gravity of what he'd uncovered. And the next, I was outside, standing on the sidewalk with Claire's pristine phone clutched in my hand like a burning coal. The world around me seemed unreal. Muffled, distant, as though I were trapped inside a snow globe someone had just violently shaken. Cars passed. People talked. A dog barked. But none of it reached me. I moved on instinct, placing one unsteady foot in front of the other, forcing myself toward my car. When I finally sank into the driver's seat, the weight of the phone in my purse felt unbearable. Heavy. Contaminated. Dangerous. My fingers trembled so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. Claire's messages. My son's name. My name. Hidden folders. Discussions. Plans. The words swirled in my mind like dark water. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to breathe. No, this must be a mistake, I whispered to myself, my voice cracking. It has to be a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe that Leo had misread something, that a file was mislabeled, that there was an innocent explanation. Anything. But the look in his eyes, the sheer panic, was not the expression of someone who'd simply stumbled onto a scheduling app or an awkward message. It was the fear of a man who had seen something he wished he could unsee. My chest tightened until it felt like a fist was squeezing my heart. I hadn't felt panic like that in years, not since the night I lost my husband. I pressed a shaking hand over my mouth, trying to hold back the rising tide of dread. Why would Claire have anything on her phone that involved me? Why would Daniel's name appear alongside mine in hidden files? Why would Leo be afraid to show me the content in his own shop? A sickening thought crawled up from the darkest corner of my mind. One I refused to entertain for more than a second. No, Daniel would never. He couldn't. But the doubt had already taken root. A small, cold seed of terror. Something moved inside me then, a painful twisting sensation, as if my heart itself recoiled. The betrayal I feared but couldn't name settled like a shadow across my mind. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against the steering wheel. My breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. Please, I whispered to no one. Please let this be wrong. But even as I said the words, the truth lingered at the edges of my consciousness. Heavy, inevitable, waiting. I sat there for several long minutes, frozen between denial and dread. until a single thought pierced through the fog. I can't face this alone. And with that realization, my fear twisted into something sharper. A desperate need to get home, to see my husband, to cling to the one person in this world I still trusted. I pulled out of the parking lot with trembling hands, unaware that the worst night of my life was only just beginning. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my entire body felt hollow, as if fear had scooped out everything inside me. The house looked peaceful. Sunlight spilling over the porch, wind chimes swaying softly, but the calm only made my panic feel more distorted, more surreal. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, leaning against it for support. The familiar scent of lemon polish and Arthur's pipe tobacco lingered in the air. For a moment, I just breathed it in, grounding myself. "Margaret," Arthur called from the living room. "You're home earlier than I expected." His voice, steady, warm, almost undid me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "Yes," I managed. "Arthur, could you turn off the television for a moment? I need to talk to you." He looked up from his recliner, concern instantly knitting his brows. He muted the TV and sat upright, adjusting his glasses. "You're pale. Did something happen?" I walked over and sat beside him, though my hands wouldn't stop trembling long enough to rest in my lap. He reached out instinctively, covering them with his own. The moment he touched me, everything inside me cracked. "Arthur," I whispered, my voice thin. "Something's wrong. Very wrong." He stiffened. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then unzipped my purse with slow, shaking fingers. "It's Claire's phone. Leo, the technician. He found something on it while repairing it." "What kind of something?" he asked, his tone cautious. I opened my gallery where I had taken the photographs Leo insisted I save. The images stared back at me, screenshots of messages, files, documents, conversations, notes. My name threaded through nearly all of them. I handed the phone to him. For a long moment, Arthur said nothing. He scrolled slowly, his face shifting from confusion, to disbelief, to something far darker. His hand tightened around the phone. "What is this?" His voice sounded hoarse. This can't be real." "It's real," I whispered, tears burning behind my eyes. "Leo showed me everything. Hidden folders, backup files, messages between Claire and..." My voice faltered. "And Daniel." Arthur's breath caught. Pain flickered across his face, raw and immediate. "No. Not Daniel. Not our boy." I wiped at my eyes, though the tears kept coming. I don't want to believe it either. But they were discussing things about me. About us. Financial things. Personal things. Things no one should talk about that way. He set the phone down, palms pressed into his eyes. A soft sound escaped him. A sound I had heard only once before. The night we lost his mother. "They're planning something," I said quietly. "Leo wouldn't show me everything in the shop, but he said it was serious. He said I was in danger." Arthur looked at me then, really looked, and in his eyes I saw fear fighting against denial. "But why?" he whispered. "Why would they do something like this?" "I don't know," I said. "But we need to be careful. We need to think." Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating, until he finally reached for my hand again. "Whatever this is," he said, voice thick with emotion, "we're going to face it together." And in that moment, even as the foundation of our lives trembled beneath us, I felt something solid, a bond forged over decades, now bracing itself for the storm we never saw coming. Arthur and I sat together in the dimming afternoon light, the weight of Claire's phone between us like an unexploded bomb. The air felt charged, still, heavy with the kind of silence that comes only when two people are trying to grasp a truth too large to accept. Arthur was the first to move. "Margaret," he said, steadying himself with a deep breath. "We need to know exactly what we're dealing with." He stood and walked toward his desk, a worn walnut piece he'd had since our first apartment. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and uncapped a pen with a click that sounded far too loud. I followed, my legs still unsteady. "What are you doing?" "Making a list," he said. "If something is happening, if they're planning anything involving us, there will be signs. We've missed something. Maybe several things. His voice wavered only slightly. It amazed me how quickly he shifted from shock to resolve. That was Arthur. Steady, methodical. A man who had always believed that problems could be solved if you laid them out clearly enough. I wished I shared that confidence. He handed me the phone. Show me the messages again. I hesitated. Each time I looked at those screenshots, a piece of me tore away, tiny jagged pieces of trust and love I never thought would be questioned. But I opened them anyway. There were mentions of our accounts, insurance policies, conversations about timelines, notes about my declining memory. Someone had been documenting us, our habits, our health, our finances, with clinical precision. Arthur flipped open his laptop and logged into our banking portal. He frowned almost immediately. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward me. I squinted, my eyes searching the list of transactions. Most were ordinary: groceries, utilities, my weekly bookstore visits. But then, "Arthur," I whispered, pointing. "We didn't do that." Several small but unusual withdrawals were listed over the past 6 months. 500 here, 200 there, 350. Always spaced out, never enough to trigger fraud alerts, but enough to add up. Over $12,000, he murmured. "Margaret, someone has been taking from our savings." My throat tightened. "Arthur, could it have been?" "Yes," he said softly, answering the question I couldn't bring myself to finish. "He has power of attorney. He could request transfers, cards, changes, anything." I sank into the chair across from him. My heart felt like it was being crushed slowly, deliberately. "He wouldn't." I whispered. Arthur didn't respond. He didn't have to. He moved next to our filing cabinet, pulling out the folder that held our insurance documents. Papers rustled, the sound harsh in the thick silence. And there it was. A life insurance policy I had never seen, issued just months ago. My name at the top. A large payout. A digital signature that looked like mine but wasn't. Arthur's jaw clenched. This is fraud." I stared at my own forged signature as if it were a stranger's handwriting. Why would they do this? I whispered. Why would Daniel be part of this? Arthur placed the papers on the desk with shaking hands. "Margaret, we have to consider that Claire isn't acting alone." My stomach lurched. "You think he's..." He cut me off gently. "We need evidence. We need to be certain before we go anywhere with this." His voice was firm, but the pain in it was unmistakable. He reached for my hand again, grounding me. "We'll go through everything. Every account. Every card. Every policy." And we did. For the next 2 hours, we pored over our finances, our insurance, our medical statements, every corner of our lives. With each discovery, dread wrapped tighter around me. Transfers we didn't authorize. Account changes neither of us remembered making. A new credit card on Arthur's account, activated but never used by us. A health note from my doctor mentioning increasing concerns about memory, which I had never discussed with him. Piece by piece, the truth built itself into a horrifying shape. Someone had been preparing a narrative, a timeline, a foundation for something that only made sense if they expected us to be gone. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Arthur," I whispered, "this isn't just money. Someone is building a story about me, about us. And they're planning something." He closed the laptop slowly, deliberately. "We can't panic," he said. "But we must protect ourselves. We verify everything. We gather proof. And tomorrow we confront whoever is involved, quietly, carefully." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled on the arm of his chair. For the first time in our decades of marriage, I saw fear in Arthur's eyes, not for himself but for me. "We're in danger," he said quietly. "Real danger." And the worst part? Deep down, I already knew he was right. Arthur and I had barely finished sorting through the last of our documents when the doorbell rang. The sound sliced through the quiet house like a blade. We froze. Neither of us needed to say the name that flashed instantly across our minds. "Claire." I felt Arthur's hand brush mine. Just a small, subtle touch, but it carried all the fear neither of us dared to voice. He straightened his shoulders, took a slow breath, and whispered, "We act normal. No matter what." I nodded, though my heart hammered so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs. I opened the door with a pleasant smile plastered across my face, though it felt brittle and unnatural. And there she was. Claire stood on the porch, perfectly composed in a cream-colored coat, her hair twisted neatly into a chignon. You would never have guessed she'd been at the center of a storm only hours earlier. Her eyes darted past me into the house, sharp and calculating, before she returned the smile. "Margaret, I just came to pick up my phone. I hope it wasn't too much trouble." "Oh, not at all, dear," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Come in." She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. Something about the sound made my stomach twist. Arthur appeared in the hallway, nodding politely. "Claire." "Arthur," she said warmly, though something flickered behind her eyes, the faintest glint of suspicion. I handed her the phone, which Leo had carefully cleaned and restored. She powered it on almost instantly, her fingers moving quickly, as though checking something specific. Her face remained perfectly pleasant, but her eyes sharpened briefly, just enough to make my skin crawl. "Looks great," she said. "Thank you again, Margaret. You really saved me today." I forced a gentle laugh. "Happy to help. You seem so busy lately. I'm glad I could take something off your plate." Arthur added, "Everything going well at work?" She nodded, though she tightened her grip on the phone for half a second. "Yes. Just stressful. Lots going on." The three of us stood there for a long, awkward moment. And then, like a snake testing the air, Claire struck. "Oh," she said lightly. "Daniel mentioned the specialist he recommended for you. The memory one. Did you ever make that appointment?" My breath stilled. Arthur shot me a warning glance so quick I almost missed it. I kept my voice bright. "We haven't had the chance." "Why do you ask?" "Just concerned," she said, tilting her head sympathetically. "You've been forgetting a few things, that's all. We just want you safe." A cold anger flickered through my chest, but I kept my smile perfectly smooth. "Oh, I remember plenty. Don't worry." Something tightened in her jaw. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but noticeable enough to confirm what Arthur and I already suspected. She was probing, testing, trying to see whether her story about my declining memory was taking root, trying to see what we knew. "Well," she said briskly, slipping her phone into her bag, "I really must be going. Big day tomorrow." I walked her to the door. She paused before stepping outside, her hand resting lightly against the frame. "Let me know if you need anything," she said, her voice lined with honey, but her eyes sharp as glass. "Really anything at all." I held her gaze. "Of course, dear." She gave one final tight-lipped smile and left. The moment the door clicked shut, my knees weakened. I leaned against the wood, exhaling shakily. Arthur approached, his face pale. "She knows," he whispered. "She may not know what exactly, but she knows something's off." I closed my eyes, pressing a trembling hand to my chest. "She's watching us," I murmured. "She's watching everything." We both turned toward the living room, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. How every room in our home, every object, every moment could be part of someone else's plan. And with that realization, the house that had once been our sanctuary began to feel like a trap waiting to spring. I barely slept that night. Every time the house creaked or the wind nudged a branch against the siding, my eyes snapped open. The shadows in our bedroom felt heavier, darker, as though the walls themselves were listening. By dawn, my nerves were frayed. Arthur found me in the kitchen, staring into a cup of tea gone cold. "You should eat something," he said gently. "I can't," I whispered. "Not until I speak to Dr. Myers. Our family doctor. A man I had trusted for nearly 20 years, through arthritis flare-ups, flu seasons, and the long, brutal months after Arthur's heart surgery. If Claire and Daniel were manipulating anything medically, I needed to know. Arthur insisted on driving me, despite my protests. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both feared what might happen if I went anywhere alone. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and peppermint gum, The same way it always had, but today it felt wrong. Too bright. Too still. As though the truth was waiting for me behind every closed door. Dr. Myers entered the room with a practiced smile, but it faltered the moment he saw my expression. "Margaret? You look shaken. What's happened?" I clasped my hands together tightly to hide the trembling. "Doctor, I need the notes you've taken about my memory. All of them." He blinked. "Your memory?" "Well, Daniel did mention some concerns. He brought me a few things he'd observed. Videos. Notes." A cold pulse shot down my spine. "Videos?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. "Yes," he said, tapping at his computer. "He said you seemed confused about dates. That you sometimes repeated stories. He thought you might be developing early cognitive decline." I felt sick. "Doctor," I said, my throat tightening. "Daniel never spoke to me about this. And I certainly never agreed to any kind of evaluation." Dr. Myers hesitated. Then he turned the computer screen toward me. And there it was. A neatly compiled file of observations, most labeled reported by Daniel Caldwell. Terms like temporal disorientation, potential memory degradation, early signs of dementia flashed across the screen like accusations I didn't recognize. But what made my blood run cold were the dates. Claims made on days I knew exactly where I was. Days when I had been perfectly coherent. Days when Daniel had stopped by just long enough to check on me. My mind spun. "Doctor," I whispered, "none of this is true." He studied my face, my clarity, my fear. Slowly, realization settled over him like a dark cloud. "Margaret, I think I may have been misled." I nodded shakily. "Someone is trying to build a case that I'm losing my mind." He exhaled long and heavy. "Then we need to correct this immediately." He printed every falsified note, every report Daniel had submitted. Then, with grave sincerity, he typed a new assessment, one based on an in-person evaluation he conducted right there. Patient alert, coherent, mentally sound. No evidence of cognitive impairment. When he signed it, he placed a steady hand over mine. "Whatever is happening," he said softly, "you need to be very careful." I left the clinic clutching the papers, my heart pounding. The truth was no longer a suspicion. It was a certainty. Someone had been quietly rewriting my sanity. And now I understood why that technician had whispered the words that had haunted me since yesterday. "Ma'am, you're in serious danger." Arthur and I barely spoke during the drive home from Dr. Myers' office. We didn't need to. The truth sat between us like a living thing. Heavy, undeniable, monstrous. Daniel and Claire weren't merely manipulating our finances or telling lies to our doctor. They were crafting a full narrative. A story designed to erase my credibility. To make my eventual accident seem tragic, but inevitable. By the time we pulled into the driveway, a cold, steady determination had replaced the panic that had ruled me for the past 24 hours. I was tired of being afraid. Tired of letting dread dictate my every breath. Arthur shut off the engine and turned to me. "We can't keep this to ourselves anymore." I nodded. "We need help." We called a lawyer that same afternoon. Someone with no ties to our family or community. Her name was Evelyn Drake. Former prosecutor, sharp as glass, and unafraid to stare danger in the face. She arrived at our home within 2 hours. We sat around the dining table. Arthur gripping the arms of his chair, me clutching the folder of printed messages and forged reports. Evelyn listened in silence as we laid out everything. Her expression remained unreadable, but her eyes sharpened with each piece of evidence. When we finished, she set her pen down with deliberate care. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell," she said, "this is not just fraud. This is a coordinated setup. And given the financial motive, combined with the staged medical decline, this is extremely serious." Her gaze met mine. "You are in danger. Both of you." Arthur inhaled shakily, confirming the fear that had been living in his eyes for days. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We go to the police," she replied. "And we go now." At the precinct, we were introduced to Detective Samuel Rowan, a man with a stern face and an even sterner tone. He listened, flipping through the documents and photos with increasing gravity. When he reached the forged medical reports, he sat back and exhaled through his teeth. In 20 years, he said slowly, I've seen a lot of ugly motives. But this level of planning? This is calculated. His words sent a chill through me. Detective, I whispered. Do you believe they are planning to hurt us? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Arthur tightened his grip on my shoulder. Detective Rowan leaned forward, voice low and firm. If someone is preparing a narrative about your mental decline, forging documents, moving money, there's usually a timeline. A window when they plan to act. And based on everything here, I'd say that window is closing. My stomach twisted. So what do we do? Arthur asked. We protect you first, Rowan said. You will not be staying in your home until this is resolved. I'll assign 2 officers to monitor your house from a distance. But more importantly, he paused, weighing his words. We need evidence of intent. Real-time evidence. What does that mean? I asked quietly. It means we set the stage, he said. We install covert audio and video devices in your home. If the suspects attempt anything, tampering with medication, planting items, discussing their plan, we'll have it. The room fell silent. The idea of our son and daughter-in-law entering our home while we weren't there plotting, preparing, it sickened me. But Rowan's voice broke through my dread. This is how we catch them. This is how we stop them. Arthur looked at me, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. We'll do it, he said firmly. I nodded, though my hands trembled. Rowan stood. Good. My team will set everything up tonight. In the meantime, you'll check into a nearby hotel under an alias. As he gathered the evidence into a secure folder, he looked at us one last time. Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, you've been targeted. But you did the right thing coming here. And we're going to stop whatever they've planned. His assurance should have comforted me. But as we left the precinct, stepping out into the cool night air, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was only just beginning. Detective Rowan's team worked quickly. By the time dusk settled over our quiet street, 2 plainclothes officers had already slipped into our home. They moved with careful efficiency, installing hidden microphones beneath tables, tiny cameras behind air vents, and motion-triggered recorders inside the kitchen cabinets. Everywhere someone would go if they intended to tamper with food, medicine, or anything else. Arthur and I watched from the car across the street, my hands clasped tightly around his. The sight of strangers combing through the private corners of our home should have made me uneasy. But all I felt was a deep, aching sadness. Our sanctuary had become a battleground. When the officers finished, Rowan ushered us toward a waiting patrol car. You'll stay at the Willowcrest Hotel, he said. Room 310. Use the names on the registration sheet. Do not contact Daniel or Claire. Do not return home until I tell you it's safe. I nodded numbly, clutching my purse, clutching that terrible phone, as if it might explode. At the hotel, Arthur paced the room in short, tight circles. I sat trembling on the edge of the bed, staring at the soft yellow lamp that cast warm shadows across the wallpaper. How did we get here, Margaret? He whispered finally. How did our lives come to this? I don't know, I said. My voice barely rose above a whisper. But we're going to see it through. We hadn't even unpacked when my phone rang. Daniel. My blood went cold. Arthur stopped pacing and stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. Answer, he mouthed. Put it on speaker. I swallowed hard and picked up. Mom? Where are you? His voice was too light, too casual. It made my skin crawl. Oh, sweetheart, I said, forcing a smile he couldn't see. Your father and I stepped out for a bit. Just running errands. A beat of silence. That's odd, he said slowly. I stopped by the house, and no one was home. Arthur and I exchanged a look. My pulse hammered in my ears. Well, I said lightly, we'll be back soon. He hesitated. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. I actually brought a surprise for you. Your favorite wine. He paused. I'll wait for you at the house. Arthur covered his mouth, eyes filled with horror. Of course, dear, I managed. We'll head back in just a bit. I hung up, and my hands immediately began to shake. Detective Rowan, sitting across the room with his arms crossed, looked at us sharply. "He's in the house," he said. "The cameras are live. Let's see what he's doing." In seconds, Rowan had pulled up a monitor. A split screen of our kitchen, living room, and hallway flickered into view. My stomach twisted violently when Daniel came into frame. He wasn't looking around leisurely. He was pacing. Nervous. Agitated. Then he pulled something out of his bag. A small glass vial. My breath caught. He unscrewed the cap and poured a fine white powder into the wine bottle he'd brought, shaking it gently, watching it dissolve. Arthur made a choking sound beside me. "Oh my God," I whispered. He was going to too. Rowan's face hardened. "We've got enough. This alone is attempted murder." But Daniel wasn't finished. He walked to the medicine cabinet, calmly replaced my blood pressure pills with a nearly identical bottle, then tucked the originals into his bag. "That's it," Rowan murmured. "That's the second method." My vision swam. I felt the room tilt. But then something even more chilling. Daniel pulled out a small electronic device, pressed a button, and bent down beneath our dining table. "He's planting a listening device," Rowan said. "He wants to monitor your conversations." Arthur covered his face with both hands. I stared at the screen, horror clawing through me. My son, my gentle boy, the one I rocked to sleep, the one who cried when he scraped his knee, the one who used to draw me Mother's Day pictures, was now standing in my kitchen preparing to kill me. And then Claire walked into the frame. She shut the door behind her quickly, breathless. "They're not coming," she hissed. "They're lying. Something's wrong." Daniel rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We can't wait. We need to leave tonight." "Did you do it?" she asked. He nodded toward the bottle. "Yeah. Everything's ready." Rowan didn't wait another second. "Move in," he ordered into his radio. Now. Through the hotel window, we saw multiple patrol cars roaring out of the station parking lot. Lights off, speed high. Within minutes, Rowan had ushered us into one of the surveillance vehicles, letting us watch through mounted cameras as officers converged on our home. The front door burst open. Shouts filled the air. "Police! Hands up!" Daniel and Claire bolted toward the back door, but officers blocked every exit. In seconds, they were forced to the floor, cuffed, and pulled upright. I watched numb, as they were led out of the house. Two silhouettes I once loved more than my own life. Their faces were twisted with shock, anger, desperation. Not regret. Not guilt. Just fury that their plan had failed. I clutched Arthur's hand, unable to speak. It was over. The danger we had sensed, feared, and uncovered piece by piece had finally revealed its full, terrible shape. And now, there was no going back. The ride back to the precinct was eerily quiet. Not the silence of peace. No, this was the silence that comes after a storm rips a house apart, leaving nothing but debris and disbelief in its wake. Arthur held my hand the entire way, gripping it as though he feared I might shatter like glass if he let go. Detective Rowan guided us into a small monitoring room where the lights were dim, and the screens glowed with the grainy footage of our own home. I didn't want to watch, but I couldn't look away either. Daniel and Claire were being escorted through our front yard, each flanked by two officers. Handcuffed. Heads down. Faces pale beneath the flashing red and blue lights. For a moment, a painful fleeting moment, I saw my boy as he had been years ago. A lanky teenager mowing the lawn, waving up at me from that same patch of grass. Now he was stumbling barefoot across it, restrained, furious, defeated. "Mrs. Caldwell," Rowan said gently, "you need to understand something very important." I tore my gaze from the screen. "If you had gone home tonight, if you had taken even a sip of that wine, they intended for you and your husband to die. Their flight was booked for tomorrow morning." I nodded slowly, though his words stabbed like needles. "I know." But knowing didn't dull the ache. Claire, meanwhile, was raging, screaming at the officers, insisting this was a mistake, a setup, that she would never hurt anyone. But her voice shook. Her mask had cracked for good. Daniel said nothing. He only stared blankly at the patrol car door, jaw clenched, refusing to look back at the house, or at the cameras, or at me. "They'll be held overnight," Rowan continued. "There will be charges. You will not have to face them tonight. I managed a whisper. What happens now? We take over, he said. You rest. You're safe. Safe. The word felt foreign. Fragile. As Arthur wrapped an arm around my shoulders, I realized the truth. Safety wasn't something the police could hand me. Not after what I'd seen. Not after who I'd seen. My son was gone. The boy I raised had vanished long before tonight. And now, all Arthur and I could do was try to survive the pieces left behind. The days that followed were a blur. Hours stitched together with police interviews, legal documents, and questions I never imagined I would have to answer about my own child. Arthur and I stayed at the hotel for nearly a week, while investigators processed our home. It felt strange, living out of small suitcases, eating meals from paper containers, sleeping under stiff sheets. Strange, but safer than being under the same roof where our son had planned our deaths. When we were finally allowed to return, the house felt hollow. Every room carried echoes of the life we thought we had. The kitchen where Daniel once baked cookies with me on Saturday mornings now held the memory of poisoned wine. The hallway where I hung his school photos was suddenly a corridor of shadows. And our bedroom, our sanctuary, felt violated not by force but by betrayal. We couldn't stay. Within a month, we sold the house, packed our belongings, piece by piece. Every keepsake felt heavier, every photograph of Daniel a blade twisting deeper. But we knew we needed distance, physical and emotional, from the place where our lives had nearly been stolen. We moved into a small apartment across town, bright and quiet, with windows that overlooked a park where children laughed and dogs chased frisbees. It wasn't home, not at first, but it was a beginning. A place where we could breathe again. The court process dragged on for months. Claire confessed eventually, striking a deal to reduce her own sentence. Daniel didn't. He stared at us in the courtroom with a coldness I still struggle to understand. He spoke of pressure, of desperation, of opportunity. But not once, did he say he was sorry. He was sentenced to life. Claire received decades. And just like that, the two people who had nearly ended our lives were removed from ours forever. Even now, for years later, the grief hasn't fully faded. It sits quietly in the corners of my heart, like an old bruise that aches when touched. We visit bookstores, attend community lectures, and take long morning walks. We live gently, carefully, gratefully. Because betrayal, especially from your own blood, teaches you that trust is fragile. And life is something you hold on to with both hands. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true, powerful stories from people like me, please subscribe to the channel. It means more than you know.